Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and drift back in time. Not to the bustling, empowered world of modern female leaders in, say, Washington, D.C., but to the glittering, yet often suffocating reality of a queen in a medieval or early modern European court. We're traveling back to an era where the crown, while a symbol of immense power, often sat upon a head burdened by isolation, expectation, and relentless scrutiny. We're going to explore why being a queen was a miserable and dangerous job. You might dream of royal balls and exquisite gowns, but trust me, after tonight, you'll have a whole new appreciation for personal freedom and privacy. You'd probably find yourself yearning for a quiet suburban home in, say, Omaha, Nebraska, within weeks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself now, a newly crowned queen, not gracefully waving from a balcony in a modern democratic capital, beloved by a nation that values individual rights and privacy, but instead, stepping into a world of immense, yet strangely limited power. Picture yourself as a celebrity confined to a gilded mansion in Beverly Hills, California. Every move scrutinized, every word potentially misinterpreted, surrounded by opulence but lacking genuine connection. Or consider a powerful CEO leading a vast corporation, but shackled by endless corporate expectations and constant public image management. Far more restrictive and less personally fulfilling than simply choosing your own path in a modern home in Charlotte, North Carolina. The very air you breathe within the castle walls feels different, heavy with expectation, dense with unspoken rules, and, surprisingly, thick with a profound sense of isolation. This is the pervasive, often suffocating reality of the golden cage royal isolation and limited agency, where the outward display of supreme power masked a deeply personal experience of confinement and diminished personal autonomy, transforming a position of ultimate authority into a lonely, highly ritualized existence, and revealing a paradox where immense privilege came hand in hand with an astonishing lack of true freedom and individual choice. From the moment you become queen, your life, as you knew it, effectively ceases to exist. Your personal identity becomes inextricably intertwined with your public role. You are no longer just you. You are the queen, a living symbol of the realm, a vessel for the dynasty, and a political pawn. This isn't like being a beloved celebrity in, say, Nashville, Tennessee, who can still retreat to their private life. Your privacy is almost entirely eradicated. The royal court itself, while appearing as a hub of power and influence, often functioned as a gilded cage. You are constantly surrounded by courtiers, ladies-in-waiting, advisors, and servants. Every action you take, every word you utter, every expression on your face is observed, interpreted, and often reported. There's no escaping the watchful eyes. This perpetual scrutiny means you must always be on, always performing the role of queen, even in moments that might seem private. Imagine living your entire life under the constant gaze of a reality TV camera crew, with every single moment documented and analyzed for public consumption. It truly sucked to never have a private moment, but it was just part of the job description. A common historical truth is that queens, particularly in medieval and early modern European courts, often experienced a high degree of public scrutiny and limited personal privacy, with their lives constantly observed by courtiers and subjects alike. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological impact of this perpetual surveillance on individual queens, and how they managed to maintain a sense of personal identity amidst the relentless demands of their public roles. Your daily routine is highly ritualized and rarely your own. From the moment you wake, your dressing, your meals, your audiences, your walks in the garden, all are governed by strict protocols and attended by numerous individuals. You might have preferences, but ultimately, your schedule is dictated by the needs of the court the king, and the state, there's little room for spontaneity or personal whim. Imagine your entire day being meticulously planned out by a team of publicists and handlers. From the moment you wake up in your luxurious apartment in, say, Miami, Florida, to the moment you go to sleep, with no room for a quiet coffee or an unplanned phone call. The Queen's agency, or ability to act independently, was remarkably limited, even for such a powerful figure. While you might hold immense symbolic power, actual political influence was often indirect and dependent on your relationship with the king or male advisors. You could whisper advice, exert subtle influence through charm or persuasion, or use your family connections. But rarely could you make direct unilateral decisions that shaped the realm, especially in matters of war, finance, or foreign policy. Your primary role, politically, was often to be a bridge between kingdoms through marriage. This indirect power could be incredibly frustrating for an intelligent or ambitious woman. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about the Golden Cage royal isolation and limited agency is the curious phenomenon of the secret garden speech, where, in some royal courts, a queen, yearning for a moment of unobserved reflection, or to subtly communicate with a trusted confidant away from the ubiquitous courtly eavesdroppers, would sometimes deliberately pace a secluded, often overgrown part of the palace garden, speaking aloud to herself or to a discreetly positioned listener, not as a sign of madness, but as a deeply personal, clandestine act of controlled vulnerability and a silent, unspoken assertion of a fleeting, private space, transforming a simple walk into a poignant, almost theatrical attempt at genuine expression amidst constant surveillance. Imagine yourself, a queen, walking slowly among the roses, ostensibly admiring the blooms, but softly murmuring a complex thought or private concern, knowing that only the birds and perhaps one trusted ear hidden nearby truly hear your unvarnished words. A deeply personal and often overlooked detail of their desperate need for genuine connection and privacy. It truly sucked to never be able to speak freely, but the garden offered a small, temporary reprieve. Your friends and confidants were carefully chosen, or more often, chosen for you. Your ladies-in-waiting might be noble women from powerful families, whose loyalty was divided between you and their own kin. True, unburdened friendship, where you could speak your mind without fear of betrayal or political repercussion, was an extreme rarity. Everyone around you had an agenda, a desire for patronage, or a family to advance. This constant awareness of ulterior motives fostered a profound sense of loneliness. Imagine being the most popular person in school in, say, Dallas, Texas, but knowing that every single one of your friends is only there for your popularity. Even your family, particularly your birth family, might be a source of tension and obligation. Your marriage was a political alliance, and your primary duty was to your new kingdom. Loyalty to your original family could be seen as treasonous. This put immense emotional strain on queens, tearing them between personal affections and political duties. You were a pawn, an asset to be deployed. Rather than an individual with independent familial bonds, historians still widely debate the true extent of political influence wielded by individual queens who successfully navigated the limitations of their roles, and whether their indirect power through patronage and private counsel was genuinely transformative or primarily symbolic within their patriarchal societies. The physical environment of the Golden Cage could also be stifling. While palaces were grand, they often lacked basic comforts by modern standards. Drafty halls, unreliable heating, and primitive sanitation. A stark contrast to a modern, climate-controlled mansion in, say, Phoenix, Arizona, meant that even in luxury, there was constant physical discomfort. And despite the vastness of the palace, your personal space was tiny, often just a bedchamber and a small private sitting room, always accessible to your immediate attendants. The expectations placed upon you were immense. You were expected to be pious, charitable, graceful, and above all, fertile. Your primary value often lay in your ability to produce heirs, particularly male ones. Failure to do so could lead to immense pressure, public scorn, and even the threat of annulment or political instability. This biological pressure was a constant, terrifying weight. Imagine the pressure of a multi-million-dollar business acquisition resting entirely on your ability to produce a specific outcome. But that outcome is entirely biological and beyond your direct control. The Golden Cage Royal Isolation and Limited Agency is not just about the historical lives of queens. It's a poignant exploration of the paradox of power and the true cost of immense privilege. It reveals how even at the pinnacle of society, human beings could experience profound isolation and a startling lack of personal freedom. Their lives meticulously crafted for public consumption rather than individual fulfillment. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own personal space, your unscrutinized choices, and the secure knowledge of your individual autonomy, remember the queen in her gilded cage, a powerful symbol, yes, but often a lonely soul, yearning for a moment of true, unobserved, and unburdened existence. Let's gently return from the silent, often invisible confines of the Golden Cage Royal Isolation and Limited Agency, where you, a modern person, felt the profound weight of a queen's ceremonial existence. If Chapter 1 explored the limitations of her power, tonight we'll delve into the most crucial and often most perilous aspect of her royal duty, ensuring the continuation of the dynasty. We're going to explore the stark, often heartbreaking, reality of bloodline burden, heir production, and perilous pregnancies, contemplating how the relentless pressure to produce an heir, particularly a male one, transformed a queen's body into a political instrument, making pregnancy and childbirth not merely personal experiences, but life-threatening trials fraught with intense scrutiny, superstitious beliefs, and the ever-present shadow of failure that would utterly redefine your understanding of familial duty and biological risk. Imagine yourself now, a queen, not blissfully planning a baby shower in a comfortable modern home in, say, San Francisco, California, surrounded by loving family and equipped with advanced medical care, but instead feeling the intense, unspoken pressure from an entire kingdom resting squarely on your womb. Picture yourself as a rare, endangered species, bred solely for the continuation of your line, every fertile moment meticulously monitored. Or consider a high-stakes athlete whose career and team's future depend entirely on a single, physically grueling performance. Far more immediate and less personally liberating than simply choosing when and how to start a family in a modern home in Portland, Oregon. The whispers in the court are not about your latest gown or your charitable deeds, but about your burgeoning belly, or more often, the frustrating lack thereof. This is the pervasive, often terrifying, reality of bloodline burden heir production and perilous pregnancies, where a queen's primary value often lay in her biological capacity, transforming her body into a battleground of dynastic hopes and fears, and revealing a profound intersection of political necessity, medical ignorance, and the raw, unyielding demands of lineage, making the act of conception and birth the single most dangerous, yet utterly essential, part of her queenly existence. For a queen, especially in medieval and early modern Europe, the most vital, dangerous, and relentlessly scrutinized aspect of her life was the production of an heir. Specifically, a male heir. Your entire purpose, the very reason for your marriage and your crown, often boiled down to this singular, biological imperative. Forget about diplomacy, cultural patronage, or even ruling if you couldn't secure the succession, your position, and perhaps the stability of the entire kingdom was jeopardized. This wasn't a choice, it was a non-negotiable duty. Imagine applying for a job in, say, New York City, New York, where the sole performance metric is your ability to produce a specific, biologically determined outcome. It truly sucked to have such a monumental task fall entirely on your biology. But failure was not an option. A common historical truth is that the primary duty of a queen in many historical periods was to produce a male heir to secure the dynastic succession, placing immense pressure on her reproductive capacity. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological toll this relentless pressure took on individual queens, and how it impacted their relationships with their husbands and the court. The pressure began immediately after marriage. Every month that passed without a sign of pregnancy was a source of mounting anxiety, not just for you, but for the king, the court, and the entire kingdom. Whispers would start. Was the queen barren? Was the king to blame? Would the marriage be annulled? The threat of annulment loomed large, a terrifying prospect that could strip you of your title, send you back to your home country in disgrace, or even confine you to a convent. This wasn't about love or companionship, it was about political utility. Once pregnant, the period of gestation was fraught with peril and intense scrutiny. There was no private doctor's office in, say, Austin, Texas, for discreet checkups. Your pregnancy was a public affair. Your diet would be carefully controlled, often based on ancient beliefs rather than medical science. You might be advised to avoid certain foods, to rest excessively, or to take specific concoctions to ensure the baby's health. Superstitions abounded. Were you carrying a son-daughter, while loved, were often seen as less valuable, as they couldn't directly inherit the throne in most patriarchal systems, and their future marriages were just another political bargaining chip. The act of childbirth itself was incredibly dangerous. This was an era before modern medicine, before antiseptics, before pain relief beyond perhaps a swig of wine. Childbirth was a leading cause of death for women, especially high-born women who might face additional complications due to their often sedentary lifestyles or restrictive clothing. Infection, hemorrhage, and prolonged labor were constant threats. Many queens died in childbirth, or suffered lasting injuries and illnesses. Imagine facing a medical procedure in, say, Los Angeles, California, with a significant chance of death, and knowing that hundreds of people, from your husband to your kingdom, are waiting anxiously for the outcome, regardless of your personal suffering. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about bloodline burden. Heir production and perilous pregnancies is the curious phenomenon of the royal fetal watch, where, during a queen's advanced pregnancy, particularly when a male heir was desperately needed, certain trusted ladies-in-waiting or even royal physicians would sometimes subtly and discreetly touch or feel the queen's abdomen. Not for medical diagnosis, but as a deeply personal, clandestine act of hopeful, almost superstitious, observation, trying to discern the baby's position or gender through touch alone, transforming a simple physical gesture into a poignant, almost ritualistic, shared anxiety over the dynasty's future. Imagine yourself, a queen, lying in your bedchamber, feeling the gentle, almost imperceptible touch of a lady's hand on your belly, a shared moment of silent, desperate hope for a son, a deeply personal and often overlooked detail of the immense emotional and physical scrutiny placed upon the royal womb. It truly sucked to have so many hands on your belly, but it meant everyone was invested in the outcome, and if the child was born healthy, the dangers didn't end there. Infant mortality rates were astronomically high. Many royal babies, even those born strong, succumbed to illnesses in their first years of life. This meant that a queen couldn't rest easy after a successful birth. She often had to keep trying, hoping to produce not just one, but multiple surviving male heirs to ensure the stability of the dynasty against the ever-present threat of childhood disease. Historians still widely debate the long-term emotional and psychological impact on queens who suffered multiple miscarriages or lost several children in infancy, and how this personal grief was managed or suppressed amidst the public pressure for continued heir production. The pressure to produce an heir could also lead to strained marital relations. The queen's body became a means to an end, and if she failed in her primary duty, it could lead to resentment, infidelity on the part of the king, often with the expectation of producing illegitimate heirs to at least secure some form of succession, and a breakdown of personal connection. Love and affection were secondary to the dynastic imperative. Furthermore, some queens faced the grim reality of political manipulation through pregnancy. False pregnancies might be announced to deter rivals, or real pregnancies might be used as leverage in international negotiations. Your very fertility, or lack thereof, could become a weapon or a weakness in the complex game of power. Imagine being constantly subjected to public rumors about your fertility, or having your reproductive status be a topic of international political discussion, far more intense and less personal than any modern family planning debate. Bloodline burden. Heir production and perilous pregnancies is not just about the biological realities of queens. It's a profound exploration of how political necessity could dominate the most personal aspects of human life. It reveals a world where a woman's body was a battleground for dynastic survival, and where the act of giving birth was not just a miracle of life, but a terrifying gamble with death, a constant reminder of her precarious position. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own reproductive autonomy and the secure knowledge of modern medical care, remember the queen, her life measured in potential heirs, her body a vessel for the kingdom's future, facing the most dangerous job with every single breath. Let's gently return from the intense, often terrifying, biological battleground of bloodline burden heir production and perilous pregnancies, where you, a modern person, felt the immense pressure resting on a queen's womb. If Chapter 2 explored her physical dangers, tonight we'll delve into the less visible, yet equally lethal, threats lurking within the very halls of power. We're going to explore the chilling, often paranoid, reality of poisoned chalice political intrigue and constant threats. Contemplating how a queen, despite her outward majesty, lived under a perpetual shadow of conspiracy, betrayal, and the very real possibility of a swift, silent death, revealing a world where loyalty was a fickle commodity, and every meal, every encounter, carried an implicit, terrifying risk that would utterly redefine your understanding of power and personal safety. Imagine yourself, now, a queen, not confidently navigating a high-stakes corporate boardroom in, say, New York City, New York, with legal protections and clear rules of engagement, but instead walking through opulent corridors where every smile might hide a dagger and every seemingly innocuous gift could conceal a deadly plot. Picture yourself as a powerful mob boss in the 1920s, constantly looking over your shoulder, trusting no one, every handshake a potential betrayal. Or consider a high-level government official during the Cold War, living with the constant threat of assassination and espionage, far more immediate and less personally secure than simply dealing with office politics in a modern, democratic workplace in Seattle. Washington. The air, but seemingly filled with the rustle of silk and the murmur of polite conversation, is also thick with an almost palpable tension, a silent hum of ambition, jealousy, and fear. This is the pervasive, often terrifying, reality of poisoned chalice political intrigue and constant threats, where a queen's existence was a relentless dance on the edge of a precipice, transforming every moment of public life into a calculated risk, and revealing a brutal truth about power. The higher you ascend, the more visible you become to those who wish to see you fall, making even the most mundane daily routines fraught with unseen, deadly peril for a queen. The dangers weren't just about childbirth or maintaining decorum. They were about survival itself. The glittering facade of the court often masked a viper's nest of ambition, rivalry, and a chilling willingness to eliminate obstacles, including the queen herself. This made political intrigue an ever-present, terrifying backdrop to her daily life. One of the most insidious threats was poison. It was the weapon of choice for silent, untraceable elimination. A queen's food, her wine, even her cosmetics or perfumes could be subtly tainted. Paranoia about poisoning was rampant in royal courts. Imagine having to wonder if every bite of food, every sip of drink, could be your last. This wasn't a melodramatic fantasy, it was a genuine concern. High-ranking individuals often employed tasters, trusted servants who would sample their food and drink before they consumed it, literally risking their lives to ensure the monarch's safety. It truly sucked to never truly trust your food, but a loyal taster was a necessary, albeit terrifying, comfort. A common historical truth is that poisoning was a feared and sometimes employed method of political assassination in medieval and early modern European courts, leading to widespread paranoia and the use of food tasters by high-ranking individuals. Historians still widely debate the actual frequency and success rate of poisonings compared to other forms of political violence, and whether the pervasive fear of poison was often disproportionate to its real prevalence in specific courts beyond outright assassination. The queen faced constant threats to her reputation and influence. Rivals might spread malicious rumors, accuse her of witchcraft, infidelity, or treason. A whisper campaign could be just as damaging as a dagger, eroding her standing with the king and the public. Imagine being a prominent figure in, say, Hollywood, California, constantly battling vicious rumors and tabloid headlines that threaten your entire career and reputation. But with no legal recourse or public relations team to defend you, foreign policy was another minefield. As a queen, you were often a foreigner, married into the ruling family as part of a political alliance. Your loyalties were constantly under suspicion. Were you truly devoted to your new kingdom? Or were you still secretly serving the interests of your birth family? A shift in international relations could suddenly turn you from a valued asset into a dangerous liability. Your very existence could become a bargaining chip, or worse, a reason for war. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about poison chalice. Political intrigue and constant threats is the curious phenomenon of the whispered bedchamber code, where, within the hyper-vigilant royal court, a queen, wishing to discuss sensitive political matters or express genuine fear away from the ever-present courtly spies, would sometimes devise subtle, almost imperceptible verbal or gestural codes with her most trusted lady-in-waiting within the confines of her bedchamber, not as a childish game, but as a deeply personal, clandestine act of survival and a silent, unspoken rebellion against pervasive surveillance, transforming seemingly innocuous conversations into a poignant, almost desperate form of encrypted communication. Imagine yourself a queen, subtly touching your necklace in a specific way as you mention a seemingly innocent detail, knowing your confidant understands the hidden meaning, a deeply personal and often overlooked detail of the desperate measures taken to maintain secrecy and safety in a world of constant eavesdropping. It truly sucked to never feel safe enough to speak freely, but coded messages offered a small, terrifying freedom. Rival factions within the court constantly jostled for power and influence. The queen might find herself caught between powerful noble families, each vying for the king's ear and greater control. Supporting the wrong faction could lead to your downfall, even if you were merely trying to maintain neutrality. You had to be a master of courtly politics, constantly assessing alliances, discerning true friends from hidden enemies, and knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. This was a mental chess game with life and death stakes. Historians still widely debate the specific impact of royal women's involvement in courtly factions and political maneuvering, and whether their active participation genuinely influenced policy outcomes or was more frequently a means of personal survival and securing dynastic interests. The king himself, while your protector, could also be a source of danger. His moods, his changing affections, his political needs, all could dramatically impact your safety and standing. If he grew tired of you, or if a more advantageous alliance presented itself, your life could become precarious. The threat of imprisonment, divorce, or even execution, a grim reality for some queens in history, was always present, hanging over your head like a sword. Imagine being married to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation in, say, Chicago, Illinois, and knowing that your entire life, your wealth, your status, and even your freedom depends entirely on his unpredictable whims and business decisions. Even the religious climate could pose a threat. accusations of heresy or witchcraft, often fueled by political rivals, could lead to a queen's downfall. In an era of intense religious fervor and superstition, such charges, however baseless, could be incredibly difficult to refute and could easily sway public opinion against her. The fear of being branded a witch or a heretic was a very real and terrifying possibility. Public opinion, though less immediate than courtly intrigue, was another factor. A queen needed to cultivate an image of piety, grace, and fertility. If the public turned against her, perhaps due to a poor harvest, a lost war, or scandalous rumors, her position could weaken significantly, making her more vulnerable to her enemies at court. Maintaining popularity with the common people, often through acts of charity or public appearances, was a subtle but crucial aspect of her political survival. Poisoned chalice. Political intrigue and constant threats is not just about the dangers faced by queens, it's a chilling exposé of the cutthroat world of absolute power. It reveals how, even at the pinnacle of society, human life could be incredibly cheap, and trust an exceedingly rare commodity. Every smile, every gift, every shared meal carried a hidden potential for betrayal, transforming the opulent royal court into a high-stakes arena where vigilance was paramount, and the threat of a silent, sudden end was a constant companion. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own personal safety and the secure knowledge of legal protections, remember the queen, her crown a target, her life a constant tightrope walk across a treacherous landscape of ambition, suspicion, and the ever-present, terrifying whisper of the poisoned chalice. Let's gently return from the chilling, high-stakes world of poisoned chalice, political intrigue, and constant threats, where you, a modern person, felt the invisible daggers lurking in every shadow of a queen's court. If Chapter 3 explored the lethal dangers, tonight we'll delve into the foundational act that often placed a woman on the throne in the first place her marriage. We're going to explore the stark, often heartbreaking, reality of crowned and controlled marriage as strategy and personal loss. Contemplating how a queen's union was rarely, if ever, about love or personal choice, but rather a meticulously negotiated political and economic alliance, transforming the most intimate of human relationships into a cold calculation of power, territory, and dynastic survival, and revealing a profound personal sacrifice that would utterly redefine your understanding of matrimony and individual agency. Imagine yourself now, a young princess, not excitedly planning a dream wedding in, say, Charleston, South Carolina, with personalized vows and a guest list filled with loved ones, but instead being told that your future, your home, and your husband have already been decided for you by powerful men in distant lands. Picture yourself as a valuable asset in a high-stakes corporate merger, where your entire future career path and even your personal connections are dictated by the terms of the deal. Or consider a star athlete traded to a new team in a distant city, leaving behind everything familiar for the sake of the organization, far more impersonal and less emotionally fulfilling than simply choosing your own partner in a modern, democratic society in Portland. Oregon. The discussions around you are not of wedding dresses or honeymoons, but of dowries, treaties, and lines of succession. This is the pervasive, often emotionally devastating reality of crowned and controlled marriage as strategy and personal loss, where a queen's marriage was a transaction of state, transforming a deeply personal commitment into a public performance of political necessity, and revealing a profound sacrifice of individual happiness at the altar of dynastic ambition, making the very act of becoming a wife the ultimate act of self-subordination for the good of the realm. For a queen, particularly in medieval and early modern times, the journey to the throne almost invariably began with a marriage of state. This was not a romantic union, forged from affection or personal compatibility. It was a meticulously negotiated political, economic, and sometimes military alliance. Your hand in marriage was a valuable commodity, a pawn on the chessboard of international relations. You were, quite literally, a bridge between kingdoms, a living treaty. Imagine being told by your parents that you were to marry a complete stranger from another country, simply because it would secure a trade deal for your family's business in, say, Des Moines, Iowa. It truly sucked to have no say in your own future. But that was the cost of royal blood. A common historical truth is that royal marriages in medieval and early modern Europe were primarily strategic alliances between ruling houses, designed to secure political power, territorial claims, and dynastic stability, with personal affection often a secondary consideration. Historians still widely debate the precise extent to which individual royal women were able to exert agency or influence the choice of their marriage partners. Given the pervasive patriarchal structures and political imperatives of the era, the negotiations surrounding a royal marriage could span years, involving emissaries, legal documents, and intricate calculations of dowries, jointures the property settled on a wife for her use after her husband's death, and future inheritances. Every clause was scrutinized, every potential benefit or pitfall weighed. You, the future queen, were often a distant figure in these discussions. Your feelings or preferences utterly irrelevant. Your fate was being decided by powerful men and sometimes women. Usually your mother or grandmother focused solely on dynastic advantage. The moment you left your birth country for your new kingdom was often a profound experience of personal loss and displacement. You were leaving behind your family, your culture, your language, and everything familiar. You might never see your parents or siblings again. You were expected to adapt instantly to a new court, new customs, and a new language if you didn't already know it, all while under intense scrutiny. Imagine being uprooted from your childhood home in, say, suburban Detroit, Michigan, and dropped into a foreign country, expected to immediately become the most prominent woman there, without any emotional support system. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about crowned and controlled marriage, as strategy and personal loss, is the curious phenomenon of the pre-marriage portrait exchange, where, prior to a royal marriage, detailed portraits of the prospective bride and groom would often be exchanged and intensely scrutinized by both courts, not just for aesthetic appreciation, but as a deeply personal, clandestine assessment of physical appearance, health, and potential fertility, transforming an artistic representation into a poignant, almost clinical, examination of dynastic suitability. Imagine yourself a princess, knowing your entire future hinged on how a painting captured your likeness, or a prince meticulously studying a painted face, trying to discern hints of health or temperament, a deeply personal and often overlooked detail of the immense pressure and impersonal nature of these calculated unions. It truly sucked to be judged so purely on your image. But a good portrait could secure your future. Your husband, the king, was often a complete stranger until the moment of your wedding. Or perhaps you'd met briefly for a formal introduction. While some royal marriages developed into relationships of genuine affection and respect, many remained cold, distant, or even hostile. Your primary interaction might revolve around your duty to produce heirs, a relentless pressure we discussed in Bloodline Burden in Chapter 2. Companionship was a bonus, not an expectation. Historians still widely debate the long-term emotional well-being of royal women forced into strategic marriages without personal choice, and whether the societal expectations of duty and dynastic continuation generally outweighed any individual psychological distress they might have experienced. The king's infidelity was also a grim reality for many queens. While you were expected to be a paragon of virtue and loyalty, your husband often felt no such constraints. Mistresses were common, and illegitimate children, while not heirs, could sometimes complicate the succession or draw the king's affection and resources away from you and your legitimate children. This emotional betrayal, often conducted openly, was a source of profound personal humiliation and heartache. Imagine being a powerful public figure in, say, Houston, Texas, and having your spouse's affairs be widely known and openly discussed, with no recourse for your personal dignity. Furthermore, the queen's role as consort meant that her status was often tied directly to her husband's, If he died, especially without a surviving male heir, your position could become incredibly precarious. You might be sent back to your birth country, confined to a convent, or even targeted by rival factions. A chilling echo of poisoned chalice in Chapter 3. Your power was derivative, borrowed from your husband, and could vanish in an instant. Even after years of service and the successful production of heirs, the threat of replacement lingered. If the king decided he needed a stronger alliance, or a younger, more fertile queen, he might seek an annulment, or even, in more brutal times, find ways to dispose of you. The longevity of your reign, and your very life, could hinge on the whims of your husband and the shifting tides of political necessity. The constant demands of royal life, combined with the emotional toll of a marriage without choice, often led to profound personal isolation and melancholy. While surrounded by a court, true intimacy and genuine understanding were rare. The queen was a symbol, a vessel, a political tool, rarely allowed to be simply herself, to express her fears, her dreams, or her private sorrows. The weight of her crown was matched only by the burden on her heart, crowned and controlled marriage. As strategy and personal loss is not just about the historical practices of royal unions, it's a poignant exploration of the human cost of power and the profound sacrifices made in the name of dynasty and statecraft. It reveals a world where the most personal of relationships was stripped of its intimacy and transformed into a cold, calculated transaction, and where a woman's entire existence was shaped, not by her own desires, but by the relentless demands of her bloodline and the political machinations of kingdoms. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own personal choices in love and life, and the secure knowledge of your individual freedom, remember the queen, her crown heavy with the weight of an unchosen destiny, her heart often aching for a love that would never be, a stark testament to the personal price of a life lived for the crown. Let's gently return from the emotionally draining landscape of crowned and controlled marriage as strategy and personal loss, where you, a modern person, felt the profound personal sacrifices inherent in a queen's strategic union. If Chapter 4 explored the heart's burdens, tonight we'll step into the paradoxical physical realities of her opulent surroundings. We're going to explore the stark, often nauseating, reality of splendor and squalor. Luxurious life, lack of hygiene. Contemplating how a queen's outward display of unimaginable wealth in royal palaces often masked a shocking lack of basic sanitation, transforming everyday life into a constant battle against filth, disease, and pervasive odors, and revealing a profound disconnect between regal grandeur and personal cleanliness that would utterly redefine your understanding of luxury and what it truly meant to live in a palace. Imagine yourself now, a queen, not enjoying the pristine cleanliness of a meticulously maintained penthouse in, say, San Diego, California, with advanced plumbing and climate control, but instead feeling the cold drafts, smelling the pervasive odors, and stepping over the refuse within the very walls of your magnificent palace. Picture yourself as a wealthy landowner in the American South before the Civil War, living in a grand plantation house that, despite its beauty, lacks indoor plumbing and relies on primitive waste disposal. Or consider a powerful railroad magnate in the late 1800s, whose opulent mansion is filled with luxurious furnishings, but still relies on outhouses and lacks modern sewage systems, far more immediate and less personally comfortable than simply living in a modern, climate-controlled home in Miami. Florida, the tapestries might be woven with gold, the furniture carved with exquisite detail, but the air is often thick with a bouquet of unpleasant scents, and the floors hide unseen realities. This is the pervasive, often gag-inducing, reality of splendor and squalor, luxurious life, lack of hygiene, where the dazzling outward appearance of royal life starkly contrasted with a fundamental absence of modern sanitation, transforming the very act of living within a palace into a continuous sensory assault, and revealing a surprising acceptance of pervasive filth even amidst unimaginable wealth and power. For a queen, the notion of splendor was often a stark contradiction to the reality of squalor. While your palace might boast towering ceilings, ornate carvings, and tapestries woven with precious threads, the underlying infrastructure, particularly concerning sanitation, was profoundly rudimentary by modern standards. Forget the gleaming ceramic bathrooms of today. Your daily life was a constant negotiation with dirt, odors, and unhygienic conditions. It truly sucked to live in such a grand place that was so fundamentally unclean. But it was just the accepted norm. A common historical truth is that even the most opulent royal palaces in medieval and early modern Europe often lacked sophisticated sanitation systems, leading to pervasive unhygienic conditions, including reliance on chamber pots and primitive waste disposal methods. Historians still widely debate the precise impact of these unsanitary conditions on the health and longevity of royal inhabitants, and whether the perceived luxury of the environment genuinely outweighed the significant health risks posed by poor hygiene. Let's start with the most basic necessity toilets. There were no flush toilets. Of course, instead palaces relied on chamber pots often emptied out of windows, onto gardens, or into cesspits or primitive privies latrines, often built over a moat or a designated shaft, allowing waste to fall directly down. These privies were rarely cleaned thoroughly, leading to a constant, pervasive stench. Imagine a large, multi-story mansion in, say, Beverly Hills, California, where everyone uses a chamber pot in their bedroom, and all waste is simply tossed out a window or down a single communal shaft. The smell alone would be enough to make you nauseous. Bathing was also a very different affair. It wasn't the daily, leisurely hot shower you enjoy today. Full-body baths were infrequent, often taken in large, portable tubs filled by servants hauling hot water. This was a laborious process, more of a semi-ritualistic cleansing than a daily routine. Between full baths, people relied on wiping with damp cloths and using perfumes to mask body odor. The concept of regular, thorough personal hygiene as we know it simply didn't exist in the same way. Imagine going weeks without a proper shower, relying only on a quick wipe down with a damp cloth in your lavish yet fundamentally dirty home in, say, New Orleans, Louisiana. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about splendor and squalor. Luxurious life. Lack of hygiene is the curious phenomenon of the perfumed personal cloud, where, amidst the pervasive odors of a royal palace, a queen or high-ranking noblewoman who would sometimes meticulously apply multiple layers of strong, exotic perfumes, not just to smell pleasant, but as a deeply personal, clandestine act of creating a mobile, aromatic sanctuary around herself, a silent, unspoken barrier against the surrounding filth, and an attempt to mask the ever-present unhygienic realities, transforming a simple cosmetic into a poignant, almost desperate attempt at olfactory control and a subtle assertion of individual space. Imagine yourself, a queen, surrounded by lingering smells, delicately dabbing a strong musk behind your ears, creating a small, invisible bubble of fragrance, a deeply personal and often overlooked detail of how they sought to manage the sensory assault of their daily lives. It truly sucked to constantly be battling bad smells, but perfume offered a fleeting moment of self-deception. Laundry was also infrequent and difficult. Clothing, especially heavy royal gowns, was not easily washed. Imagine wearing the same elaborate dress for days or weeks, accumulating dirt, sweat, and perhaps even food stains. While outer garments might be brushed, the underlying layers of clothing would often be worn until truly soiled. This contributed to body odor and could also harbor pests. The floors of the palace halls, particularly in the dining areas, were often covered with rushes or straw. While this provided some insulation and a soft surface, these rushes were rarely changed daily. They accumulated food scraps, spilled drinks, animal waste, and human bodily excretions. This created a breeding ground for bacteria, insects, and rodents, and contributed to the overall pervasive stench of the palace. Imagine the luxurious marble floors of a modern museum in, say, Washington, D.C., covered in a layer of old, rotting straw and refuse. Historians still widely debate the actual efficacy and frequency of medieval palace cleaning routines, and whether the documented efforts to remove rushes and waste were sufficient to mitigate the widespread health risks posed by the continuous accumulation of filth. Even the grand banquet halls were sensory assaults. The vast quantities of food, the communal eating, the lack of immediate waste disposal, and the sheer number of people and animals created a chaotic, often unsanitary environment. The remnants of a feast could linger, contributing to the overall uncleanliness of the palace. Imagine the lingering smell of thousands of dirty dishes and food scraps in a massive ballroom in, say, Las Vegas, Nevada. Without any cleaning staff for days, the lack of understanding about germ theory was perhaps the most significant factor. People simply didn't connect filth to disease in the way we do now. While they understood that bad smells could indicate decay, the microscopic world of bacteria and viruses was entirely unknown. This meant that practices that we now consider utterly disgusting were simply the norm, with no perceived direct link to illness, though of course the link was very much there. This paradox of splendor and squalor meant that a queen, despite living in unparalleled luxury, was often more vulnerable to disease than a modern-day person living in far more modest circumstances. The very grandeur of her environment, designed to impress and overwhelm, simultaneously harbored hidden threats to her health and comfort. The jewels might sparkle, the silks might shimmer, but the air often carried the scent of decay, and the floors teemed with unseen life. Splendor and squalor. Luxurious life. Lack of hygiene is not just about the physical conditions of medieval palaces. It's a stark reminder of how far human civilization has come in its understanding of hygiene and sanitation. It reveals a world where the outward display of power and wealth was often fundamentally disconnected from the realities of personal comfort and well-being, and where even the most privileged individuals lived amidst conditions that would shock and sicken most modern sensibilities. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own clean bed, your freshly laundered sheets, and the secure knowledge of your sparkling bathroom, remember the queen in her magnificent, yet strangely unhygienic palace. A constant battle between the shimmering facade of luxury and the pervasive reality of dirt, disease, and the constant, inescapable stench of everyday life. Let's gently return from the jarring, odorous reality of splendor and squalor. Luxurious life. Lack of hygiene. Where you, a modern person, grimaced at the stark contrast between palace grandeur and pervasive filth. If Chapter 5 explored the private realities of royal living, tonight we'll step into the relentless glare of the public eye. We're going to explore the astonishing, often suffocating, reality of the unseen scrutiny, public image, and relentless judgment, contemplating how a queen's entire existence was a carefully orchestrated performance, perpetually judged by her court, her subjects, and even foreign powers, transforming her every action from the grandest ceremony to the most mundane personal habit into a political statement, and revealing a profound lack of personal freedom that would utterly redefine your understanding of fame and public expectation. Imagine yourself, now, a queen, not casually strolling through a park in, say, San Francisco, California, occasionally recognized by friendly admirers, but instead feeling an invisible weight of expectation on your shoulders, every gesture observed, every smile analyzed, every perceived misstep magnified 1,000-fold. Picture yourself as a meticulously curated brand ambassador for a global corporation. Every public appearance scripted, every social media post vetted, with any deviation from the ideal image leading to immediate crisis. Or consider a presidential candidate during a fiercely contested election, where every nuance of your public persona is dissected by pundits and the populace. Far more immediate and less personally liberating than simply living your life without constant public review in a modern home in Minneapolis. Minnesota, the air, thick with the rustle of courtly whispers, feels charged with judgment, a silent assessment of your worthiness, your piety, and your very femininity. This is the pervasive, often suffocating reality of the unseen scrutiny, public image, and relentless judgment, where a queen's life was a ceaseless, high-stakes theatrical production, transforming her personal identity into a public commodity, and revealing a chilling truth that the ultimate symbol of power was often the least free, bound by an unyielding, omnipresent gaze that tolerated no flaw and demanded ceaseless perfection. For a queen, life was a constant performance. From the moment she rose until she retired, she was on display. This wasn't merely about posing for portraits or attending formal events. It was a pervasive, unseen scrutiny that permeated every aspect of her existence. You were not just a woman. You were the living embodiment of the kingdom's virtue, fertility, and strength. Any deviation from this idealized image could have severe political repercussions. Imagine living your entire life under the constant gaze of a reality TV camera crew, with every single moment documented and analyzed for public consumption. It truly sucked to never have a private moment, but it was just part of the job description. A common historical truth is that queens, particularly in medieval and early modern European courts, were subject to intense public scrutiny, with their appearance, behavior, and personal lives constantly observed and judged by their courts and subjects, as their image was often inextricably linked to the perceived strength and legitimacy of the monarchy. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological impact of this perpetual surveillance on individual queens, and how they managed to cultivate an effective public image while navigating profound personal constraints. Your appearance was paramount. Clothing was not just fashion, it was a political statement. Every gown, every piece of jewelry, every hairstyle was meticulously chosen to convey wealth, power, and modesty. The latest fashions from other European courts might be adopted, but always with an eye toward projecting an image of appropriate majesty. And woe betide the queen, whose appearance was deemed unfashionable, extravagant, or worse, unqueenly. Your body, too, was under constant review. Was she too thin? Too fat? Was she showing signs of pregnancy? A constant pressure, as we remember from Bloodline Burden in Chapter 2. These were not private concerns, but matters of state, openly discussed by courtiers and commoners alike. Imagine living in, say, New York City, New York, where every outfit you wear and every pound you gain or lose is a front-page headline, debated by millions. Then there was your behavior. You were expected to embody piety, grace, wisdom, and charity. Your demeanor in public, your interactions with courtiers, your conduct during religious ceremonies, all were meticulously observed. A queen who was seen as too frivolous, too melancholy, too outspoken, or too meek could quickly fall out of favor with the king, the court, or the public. Every action, even seemingly minor ones, carried symbolic weight. Dropping a glove, a momentary frown, or a misplaced word could be interpreted as a sign of ill temper, disloyalty, or weakness. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about the unseen scrutiny, public image, and relentless judgment is the curious phenomenon of the whispered etiquette corrections, where, during a banquet or courtly event, if a queen inadvertently made a minor social faux pas, reaching too far across the table for a dish, exhibiting a moment of genuine emotion, a trusted lady-in-waiting or a discreet advisor would sometimes, with practiced subtlety, offer a whispered word or a barely perceptible gesture, not as a direct reprimand, but as a deeply personal, clandestine act of immediate course correction and a silent, unspoken reminder of the constant need for flawless public performance, transforming a simple piece of advice into a poignant, almost desperate attempt to maintain a perfect facade. Imagine yourself a queen, feeling a gentle touch on your arm and hearing a soft murmur about the proper way to hold one's fan. a deeply personal and often overlooked detail of the constant vigilance required to maintain an impeccable public image. It truly sucked to be corrected in front of others, but it was essential to avoid worse judgment. Your piety was also under constant scrutiny. In deeply religious societies, a queen was expected to be a paragon of Christian virtue. Her attendance at Mass, her acts of charity, her devotion to saints, all were public affirmations of her faith and her moral standing. Any perceived lapse in piety could lead to accusations of heresy or even witchcraft, especially if she was a foreigner. A chilling echo of the dangers of poisoned chalice in Chapter 3. These accusations could be politically devastating and even life-threatening. Imagine your religious practices, or lack thereof, being constantly monitored and publicly judged by an entire nation in, say, Salt Lake City, Utah, with severe consequences for any perceived transgression. Historians still widely debate the actual sincerity of the piety displayed by many medieval and early modern queens, and whether their public religious devotion was primarily a strategic performance to enhance their legitimacy and popularity, or a genuine reflection of their personal faith in a deeply religious era. Foreign queens faced an even greater challenge. They often arrived in a new land with a different language, culture, and set of customs. They were immediately judged not just on their personal qualities, but on their ability to assimilate and represent their new kingdom. Any perceived clinginess to their birth culture, or any apparent preference for their own countrymen, could quickly lead to accusations of disloyalty or foreign influence. The struggle to fit in, while simultaneously maintaining a regal demeanor, was immense. The reasons for the relentless judgment were multifaceted. For the common people, the queen represented the embodiment of hope and order. Her image was a powerful propaganda tool, reflecting the strength and divine favor of the monarchy. For the courtiers, she was a key player in the intricate game of power. Judging her behavior was a way to assess her influence, anticipate political shifts, and position themselves accordingly. For rival factions, a perceived flaw in the queen's character or conduct could be exploited to undermine her, and by extension, the king. Even your personal relationships were not private. Your relationship with the king, your children, and even your closest ladies-in-waiting were subject to public interpretation. Was the king truly affectionate towards you? Did you show enough maternal devotion? Was your closest confidant a loyal friend or a dangerous spy? These intimate dynamics were fodder for court gossip and political maneuvering, adding another layer of performance to your most personal interactions. The unseen. Scrutiny, public image, and relentless judgment is not just about the historical lives of queens. It's a timeless exploration of the burdens of public life and the relentless demands of image. It reveals how even at the pinnacle of society, an individual could be stripped of personal freedom. Their every move, every expression, every gesture meticulously observed and judged by a demanding world. The grand spectacle of royalty was, for the queen, a constant, exhausting performance, where any flaw, however minor, could be exploited, and where the weight of public expectation often overshadowed the quiet dignity of personal truth. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own privacy, your unscrutinized choices, and the secure knowledge that your life is largely your own. Remember the queen, trapped in the unforgiving glare of the public eye, a prisoner of her own image, perpetually judged, and forever performing the arduous role of royalty. Let's gently return from the relentless glare of the unseen scrutiny public image, mon relentless judgment. Where you, a modern person, felt the suffocating pressure of a queen's constant performance. If Chapter 6 explored the external pressures, tonight we'll delve into the internal battles, often waged against unseen foes within her own body. We're going to explore the stark, often terrifying, reality of sickness and superstition, royal ailments and dubious cures, contemplating how a queen, despite her immense wealth, was profoundly vulnerable to disease in an era without modern medicine, forcing her to rely on a perplexing mix of ancient beliefs, unproven remedies, and the often deadly interventions of physicians whose knowledge was more rooted in tradition than science, revealing a world where even a sovereign's health was a precarious gamble, and every fever, every ache, carried an implicit, terrifying threat to her life and the stability of the realm. Imagine yourself now, a queen, not comfortably recuperating from a minor ailment in a sterile, well-equipped hospital in, say, Boston, Massachusetts, with access to cutting-edge diagnostics and effective medications, but instead lying in a grand, yet drafty bedchamber, surrounded by concerned courtiers and a physician whose primary tools are leeches, strange concoctions, and astrological charts. Picture yourself as a powerful figure in the early 1800s, perhaps a wealthy plantation owner in the South, relying on folk remedies and bleeding for every illness. Or consider a prominent citizen in a rapidly expanding frontier town where medical knowledge is rudimentary and epidemics sweep through communities with devastating speed, far more immediate and less personally secure than simply calling your doctor for a prescription in a modern home in Charlotte, North Carolina. The air, once filled with the sounds of banquets and music, now carries the hushed whispers of anxiety and the pungent smell of strange poultices. This is the pervasive, often terrifying, reality of sickness and superstition, royal ailments and dubious cures, where a queen's physical well-being was a constant, unpredictable battle against illness, transforming every ache and pain into a potential crisis for the state, and revealing a profound intersection of immense privilege, medical ignorance, and deeply ingrained superstition, making even the common cold a potential harbinger of dynastic instability. For a queen, health was an unpredictable and often fleeting commodity. Despite living in palaces filled with material wealth, you were acutely vulnerable to the same diseases that plagued commoners, and often more so, due to unique factors of royal life. This made sickness a pervasive and terrifying threat, constantly lurking in the shadows of opulence. It truly sucked to be so rich and yet so helpless against disease. But that was the brutal reality of their time. A common historical truth is that even high-ranking medieval and early modern individuals, including queens, were highly susceptible to various infectious diseases due to the lack of modern sanitation, germ theory, and effective medical treatments. Historians still widely debate the precise causes of death for many historical figures, often due to the imprecise medical terminology and diagnostic limitations of the era, making it difficult to differentiate between specific diseases. The most common royal ailments were often those born from the very conditions of their living. Digestive issues were rampant, likely due to rich diets, lack of fresh produce, and questionable food preparation. Fevers, coughs, and various infections were also constant threats, often leading to debilitating or fatal outcomes. Given the rudimentary hygiene, a stark contrast to splendor and squalor in Chapter 5, common illnesses could quickly escalate into deadly epidemics. Imagine being confined to your bed in a grand estate in, say, Louisville, Kentucky, suffering from a severe stomach illness, with no effective medication, only the lingering smell of strange herbal concoctions. When a queen fell ill, her illness was not a private matter. It was an affair of state. Courtiers would hover, whispers would circulate, and the succession a constant anxiety. As we recall from Bloodline Burden in Chapter 2, would become a renewed source of concern. The king himself would be anxious, not just for his wife, but for the stability of his realm. This added immense psychological pressure to an already physically suffering individual. The medical treatments available were, by modern standards, dubious at best, and often deadly. Physicians, often highly educated for their time, operated under theories like the four humors, believing that illness was caused by an imbalance of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Their primary treatments often involved bleeding cutting a vein to release bad blood, or purging inducing vomiting or diarrhea to restore balance. Imagine feeling weak and ill, only for a doctor to insist on draining more of your blood, believing it would help. This practice might ironically often weaken the patient further, making them more susceptible to other complications. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about sickness and superstition. Royal ailments and dubious cures is the curious phenomenon of the royal dream diagnosis, where when a queen fell gravely ill, some royal physicians or even courtly advisors, alongside their conventional treatments, would sometimes meticulously analyze the queen's dreams or the dreams of those close to her, not as a psychological insight, but as a deeply personal, clandestine attempt to gain supernatural understanding of her ailment or a glimpse into her fate, transforming a nightly unconscious process into a poignant, almost ritualistic diagnostic tool. Imagine yourself a queen, recounting a vague dream about a dark river, and seeing your physician nod gravely, interpreting it as a sign of imbalance, a deeply personal and often overlooked detail of the desperate and varied methods used in the absence of scientific knowledge. It truly sucked to have your dreams scrutinized. But in an era of such ignorance, any perceived sign was clung to. Superstition played a significant role in both diagnosis and cure. Illnesses might be attributed to divine punishment, witchcraft, or malevolent spirits. This led to a reliance on prayers, religious relics, and charms alongside, or even instead of, medical interventions. A queen might wear a protective amulet, or have holy water sprinkled in her room. Pilgrimages to sacred sites were often undertaken in hopes of a miraculous cure. This blend of faith and folklore colored every aspect of illness. Imagine your doctor in, say, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, suggesting you wear a lucky charm and visit a specific church instead of prescribing antibiotics for a bacterial infection. Historians still widely debate the actual efficacy of various traditional and folk remedies used by medieval physicians, and whether the placebo effect or specific herbal properties might have provided limited relief. Even if the underlying medical theories were incorrect, the lack of anesthetics and antiseptics made any surgical procedure incredibly perilous. Amputations, setting broken bones, or dealing with internal injuries were agonizing and carried an extremely high risk of infection. Childbirth, as we discussed, a grim echo of bloodline burden in Chapter 2, was perhaps the most common and dangerous medical event a queen faced, with death from puerperal fever, childbed fever being a constant threat. Even the very act of mourning for deceased family members could pose a health risk. Prolonged periods of grief, often accompanied by fasting or self-neglect, could weaken the immune system, making queens more vulnerable to the prevalent diseases. The emotional burden of loss was often compounded by physical fragility. The constant threat of epidemics was also ever present. The plague, smallpox, typhus. These diseases swept through populations indiscriminately, and royal palaces, despite their walls, were not immune, especially given the constant flow of people and goods. A queen might be forced to flee her capital, or witness her own family and court decimated by an unseen enemy. Sickness and superstition, royal ailments and dubious cures is not just about the medical challenges of medieval queens. It's a sobering reminder of the fragility of human life in the face of disease when scientific understanding is limited. It reveals a world where wealth offered little protection against microscopic threats, and where the most powerful women on earth relied on a baffling mix of faith, folklore, and often harmful medical practices to combat the pervasive, terrifying reality of illness. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own good health and the secure knowledge of modern medical advancements. Remember the Queen, her majestic body a battleground for unseen forces, her life a constant gamble against the very air she breathed, her only solace often a whispered prayer or a dubious cure. Let's gently return from the chilling, often frustrating world of sickness and superstition, royal ailments, and dubious cures, where you, a modern person, marveled at the sheer medical ignorance that plagued even the most privileged. If Chapter 7 explored the internal battles of illness, tonight we'll turn our gaze to the external, yet equally oppressive, forces that shaped a queen's daily existence, her clothing, and her beauty regimen. We're going to explore the astonishing, often agonizing, reality of fashion's folly, restrictive clothing, and painful beauty, contemplating how the elaborate, seemingly glamorous attire of a queen was, in fact, a physical prison of heavy fabrics, constricting corsets, and intricate hairstyles, forcing her to endure constant discomfort and sometimes debilitating pain in the relentless pursuit of an idealized, often dangerous, standard of beauty, revealing a profound paradox where ultimate luxury came hand in hand with an astonishing lack of physical freedom and personal comfort that would utterly redefine your understanding of glamour and the true cost of royal appearance. Imagine yourself now a queen, not comfortably slipping into breathable, functional clothing for a casual day in, say, San Antonio, Texas, where personal comfort and freedom of movement are prioritized, but instead being laced into a rigid, bone-supported corset, draped in layers of heavy, unyielding fabric, and adorned with an elaborate, often painful headdress. Picture yourself as a Gilded Age socialite in New York City, forced into impossibly tight corsets and voluminous skirts for hours on end, sacrificing breath and movement for appearance. Or consider a Victorian actress, enduring extreme theatrical costumes, heavy makeup, and intricate wigs for lengthy performances, far more immediate and less personally comfortable than simply choosing your own wardrobe in a modern home in Phoenix. Arizona. The rustle of rich silks and velvets fills the air, but beneath the shimmering surface lies a framework of whalebone, metal, and tightly pulled laces, squeezing and shaping your body into an unnatural silhouette. This is the pervasive, often agonizing, reality of fashion's folly, restrictive clothing and painful beauty, where a queen's outward magnificence was achieved through an internal landscape of discomfort and constraint, transforming her very body into a living canvas for rigid societal expectations, and revealing a chilling truth that the ultimate symbol of power and wealth was often the least physically free, constantly bound and reshaped by the merciless demands of royal fashion and the relentless pursuit of an often dangerous ideal of beauty. For a queen, dressing was far from a simple act. It was a laborious, often painful, daily ritual, driven by the relentless demands of fashion and the era's often bizarre standards of beauty. Your magnificent gowns, while breathtaking to behold, were often veritable instruments of torture, designed for show rather than comfort or practicality. It truly sucked to be so beautifully uncomfortable. But to complain would be unqueenly. A common historical truth is that elaborate royal and aristocratic fashions in various historical periods, particularly from the medieval to the Victorian era, often involved highly restrictive garments like corsets and heavy layers, which prioritized an idealized silhouette over comfort or health. And however, historians still widely debate the precise long-term physiological impacts of extreme corsetry and other restrictive clothing on the health of women, and whether the perceived beauty and social status conferred by such attire outweighed the physical discomfort and potential health risks. At the heart of many royal ensembles, especially from the Renaissance onwards, was the corset or stays. These garments, often reinforced with whalebone or steel, were tightly laced to cinch the waist to an impossibly small size, elevating the bust and creating the fashionable silhouette of the era. Breathing deeply was often difficult. Internal organs were compressed, and fainting was not uncommon, especially in warm weather or during strenuous activities. Imagine being a high-powered executive in, say, Chicago, Illinois, forced to wear a device all day that compresses your torso, making it difficult to breathe or sit comfortably, simply to maintain a specific corporate image. Layer upon layer of heavy fabrics compounded the discomfort. Royal gowns were made of rich brocades, velvets, and silks, often interwoven with gold or silver thread, and embellished with pearls, jewels, and intricate embroidery. These layers, combined with voluminous skirts often supported by farthingales, crinolines, or panniers, added immense weight and bulk. Walking, sitting, or even turning could be an arduous task. Imagine wearing a full-length, heavily embroidered rug wrapped around you, plus a wide, stiff hoop skirt, just to attend a formal dinner in, say, Dallas, Texas. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about fashion's folly-restrictive clothing and painful beauty is the curious phenomenon of the hidden pocket perfume, where within the voluminous, multi-layered skirts of a royal gown, a queen or her lady-in-waiting would sometimes discreetly sew a small, hidden pocket containing a sachet of strong, aromatic herbs or a tiny vial of concentrated perfume. Not as an open display of fragrance, but as a deeply personal, not clandestine attempt to combat the pervasive odors of the palace, a callback to splendor and squalor in Chapter 5, or to subtly refresh her immediate personal space. Transforming a simple piece of clothing into a poignant, almost desperate attempt at olfactory control amidst the discomfort. Imagine yourself, a queen, reaching subtly into the folds of your skirt for a hidden sachet of lavender. A quiet, almost imperceptible act to escape the unpleasant smells. A deeply personal and often overlooked detail of how they sought comfort in their physically demanding attire. It truly sucked to be surrounded by such pervasive smells. But a hidden perfume offered a fleeting moment of self-soothing. Hairstyles were equally demanding and often painful. Elaborate updos, towering wigs, and intricate braids were often adorned with jewels, ribbons, and even feathers, adding significant weight to the head and requiring hours to construct. These styles were rarely washed or redone daily, leading to discomfort, itching, and sometimes even harboring pests. Imagine a modern celebrity stylist in, say, Hollywood, California, spending hours constructing an elaborate hairstyle, but then not washing or redoing it for a week or more. Historians still widely debate the actual health implications of lead-based cosmetics and other potentially toxic beauty products used by royal women, and whether the documented skin conditions or systemic illnesses could be directly attributed to their prolonged use. The pursuit of beauty also involved cosmetics that, by modern standards, were incredibly dangerous. Lead-based white paint was commonly used to achieve a pale, unblemished complexion. Considered the height of beauty, this lead absorbed through the skin could cause lead poisoning, leading to skin damage, hair loss, neurological issues, and even death. Rosy cheeks and lips were often achieved with carmine or other natural dyes, sometimes with less toxic, but still primitive, results. Imagine knowingly applying a toxic substance to your face every day, simply to meet a societal standard of beauty. It was a choice born of necessity and societal pressure. Even the simple act of walking was constrained. Long, heavy skirts, often with trains, required careful maneuvering. The corsets limited bending and quick movements. A queen's graceful glide was not natural, but a carefully practiced and physically demanding art form. You were literally encased in your status, your movements dictated by the demands of your attire. The queen's clothing was not just about personal style, it was a powerful visual statement of her wealth, her status, and the dignity of the monarchy. Every seam, every jewel, every fold of fabric conveyed a message to her subjects and to foreign emissaries. It was part of the constant public performance, a clear callback to the unseen scrutiny in Chapter 6 that defined her life. The discomfort was a sacrifice, a hidden price for the outward display of power. This relentless pursuit of a fashionable silhouette and an idealized beauty often came at the expense of genuine comfort, health, and freedom of movement. The queen's body was treated as a mannequin, reshaped and adorned to fulfill a visual role, rather than cherished for its natural form or its need for ease. Fashion's folly. Restrictive clothing and painful beauty is not just about the historical wardrobe of queens. It's a stark commentary on the extreme lengths to which individuals, particularly women, have gone throughout history to conform to societal beauty standards. It reveals how even at the pinnacle of power, the female body could be subjected to literal constriction and danger in the pursuit of an idealized appearance. transforming personal adornment into a profound form of physical and psychological imprisonment. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your soft, breathable pajamas, and the secure knowledge that your clothing prioritizes your comfort and health. Remember the Queen, her majestic body encased in beautiful agony, a prisoner of her own dazzling attire, forever bound by the painful demands of royal fashion and the relentless, often dangerous pursuit of beauty. Let's gently return from the constricting, often painful world of fashions. Folly, restrictive clothing, and painful beauty, where you, a modern person, cringed at the physical sacrifices queens endured for appearance. If Chapter 8 explored the external pressures of attire, tonight we'll delve into the very sustenance that fueled their demanding lives, and the hidden discomforts it often brought. We're going to explore the stark, often unpredictable, reality of feast or famine diet, delicacies and digestive discomfort, contemplating how a queen's seemingly luxurious diet, rich in exotic meats and elaborate dishes, was often a double-edged sword, leading not only to lavish indulgence but also to chronic ailments, a lack of essential nutrients, and a constant struggle with digestive distress in an era without modern nutritional science or effective remedies, revealing a profound paradox where ultimate culinary privilege often led to surprising dietary deficiencies and persistent physical discomfort that would utterly redefine your understanding of a royal meal. Imagine yourself, now, a queen, not casually enjoying a balanced, nutritionally optimized meal prepared in a modern, hygienic kitchen in, say, San Diego, California, with a full understanding of dietary needs, but instead sitting before a groaning table laden with roasted meats, heavy sauces, and sweet confections, knowing that fresh vegetables are scarce and the consequences of overindulgence or contamination are often severe. Picture yourself as a wealthy industrialist in the late 1800s, whose diet consists primarily of rich, heavy, and often unbalanced foods, leading to widespread digestive issues and gout among the elite. Or consider a grand plantation owner in the antebellum South, whose table groans with an abundance of meat and sweets. But fresh produce is seasonal, and the understanding of vitamins is non-existent. Far more immediate and less personally comfortable than simply ordering a healthy, diverse meal from a modern restaurant in Austin, Texas. The aroma of spices and roasted game fills the air. But beneath the tantalizing facade lies a diet that, despite its opulence, is often remarkably unhealthy, perpetually challenging your digestive system. This is the pervasive, often uncomfortable reality of feast or famine diet, delicacies and digestive discomfort, where a queen's culinary world was defined by extremes, transforming the very act of eating into a source of both immense pleasure and chronic discomfort, and revealing a surprising truth that the ultimate gastronomic privilege often came hand in hand with persistent digestive woes. A silent, unglamorous burden of royal life. For a queen, food was not just sustenance, it was a dazzling display of wealth, power, and generosity. Your table would groan under the weight of countless dishes, many of them exotic and intricately prepared, and however, this apparent abundance often masked a surprisingly unbalanced diet and a host of digestive discomforts. It truly sucked to have access to so much food and still feel constantly unwell. But that was often the hidden price of royal indulgence. A common historical truth is that the diets of medieval and early modern European royalty, while abundant in meat and rich dishes, often lacked sufficient fresh fruits and vegetables, leading to nutritional imbalances and various health issues. Historians still widely debate the precise prevalence and severity of specific nutritional deficiencies among the elite, and how these dietary patterns might have contributed to chronic conditions like gout or digestive ailments. The royal diet was often overwhelmingly meat-heavy. Roasted boar, venison, swan, peacock, and countless types of fowl would dominate the table. While impressive, this meant a high intake of protein and fat, often without enough fiber to balance it out. Imagine trying to eat 3 full meals a day and say, Kansas City, Missouri, where almost every dish is a different kind of roasted or stewed meat, with very few vegetables or fruits. Fresh fruits and vegetables were often scarce, especially out of season, or difficult to preserve. While some gardens provided produce, it wasn't the daily, diverse intake we enjoy today. This lack of fresh produce meant a deficiency in essential vitamins and fiber, contributing to issues like constipation, a common and highly uncomfortable ailment for royalty. Imagine dealing with chronic digestive sluggishness while having to maintain a perfect public demeanor, a direct echo of the unseen scrutiny in Chapter 6. A truly unpleasant burden, a fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about feast or famine diet. Delicacies and digestive discomfort is the curious phenomenon of the hidden spice purge, where, after a particularly opulent royal feast, a queen or her trusted attendants might discreetly administer a strong, often bitter herbal concoction, or a mixture of potent spices, not as a delightful digestif, but as a deeply personal, clandestine attempt to induce purging or bowel movements to alleviate severe digestive discomfort or perceived humorial imbalance. Transforming a seemingly medicinal remedy into a poignant, almost desperate act of self-treatment against the consequences of overindulgence. Imagine yourself a queen, after a night of rich feasting, quietly sipping a foul-tasting brew, hoping for relief. A deeply personal and often overlooked detail of the unglamorous realities behind the lavish banquet. It truly sucked to have to resort to such drastic measures, but discomfort often trumped dignity. Rich sauces and spices were liberally applied to dishes. While spices were incredibly valuable and sometimes used to mask the taste of less than fresh meat, they also added to the richness and heaviness of the food. These sauces, often thickened with bread or animal fats, could be difficult to digest in large quantities. The complex interplay of flavors, while delightful, often came at a digestive cost. Sweet treats and confections were also a sign of extreme wealth. Sugar, honey, and dried fruits were used to create elaborate desserts. While a delight, these provided empty calories and contributed to dental problems in an era without modern dentistry and potentially other metabolic issues. Imagine a modern dentist in, say, Boston, Massachusetts, looking at the teeth of a queen whose diet was rich in sugar and poor in hygiene. A grim callback to splendor and squalor in Chapter 5. Historians still widely debate the extent to which the consumption of delicacies, like roasted swan or peacock, was purely for display versus actual enjoyment, and whether the perceived exoticism of these foods often mask their relative lack of nutritional value compared to more common fare. The lack of refrigeration meant that food, especially meat, could spoil quickly. While cooks did their best, and strong spices could mask flavors, subtle contamination was a constant risk, leading to food poisoning and severe stomach upsets. A queen's illness, a critical concern, as we recalled from sickness and superstition in Chapter 7, could easily be triggered by an improperly handled dish. The sheer quantity of food presented at a royal meal was also overwhelming. While the queen might not eat every dish, the pressure to sample, to entertain, and to project an image of abundance meant constant exposure to rich, heavy fare. Overeating, even unintentionally, was common, leading to bloating, indigestion, and general lethargy. Imagine being served a 10-course meal every single night in, say, Charleston, South Carolina, and feeling obligated to try a little bit of everything, knowing it will make you feel uncomfortably full. Furthermore, a queen's emotional state could also impact her digestion. The constant stress, anxiety about heir production. Remember bloodline burden in Chapter 2. Political intrigue, a chilling echo of poisoned chalice in Chapter 3, and public scrutiny, a pervasive reality from the unseen scrutiny in Chapter 6, could all manifest as physical digestive problems. The mind-body connection, though poorly understood in their era, was undoubtedly at play. The feast or famine aspect didn't necessarily refer to a lack of food, but to the cyclical nature of its quality and availability. and the sometimes brutal consequences of its consumption. One day, a queen might feast on an incredible variety of foods. The next, she might suffer the agonizing discomfort of a severe stomachache. This unpredictability, coupled with the lack of effective remedies, made even the act of dining a source of silent, often solitary suffering, feast or famine diet. Delicacies and digestive discomfort is not just about the historical diets of queens. It's a poignant exploration of how privilege, when unaccompanied by scientific understanding, can ironically lead to a different form of hardship. It reveals a world where the most luxurious culinary experiences often came at the cost of chronic physical discomfort, transforming the very act of nourishing the body into a source of persistent, unglamorous suffering. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the quiet comfort of your own balanced diet, your easy access to fresh produce, and the secure knowledge of modern food safety, remember the queen, her table laden with riches, her stomach often churning with discomfort, a silent testament to the hidden miseries of royal indulgence and the surprising fragility of even the most privileged existence. Let's gently return from the often unappetizing reality of feast or famine diet. Delicacies and digestive discomfort, where you, a modern person, gained a profound appreciation for your balanced meals and effective antacids. If Chapter 9 explored the internal discomforts of a queen's diet, tonight we'll bring our journey to a close by bridging the centuries, contemplating how the myriad challenges faced by historical queens, despite the vast differences in their world and ours, still echo in the lives of modern royalty and powerful women today. We're going to explore modern royalty enduring challenges and hidden pressures, contemplating how the golden cage, the bloodline burden, the constant scrutiny, and even the echoes of bodily discomfort continue to shape the lives of those born to the crown in a world obsessed with privacy and personal freedom, revealing that while the external dangers may have diminished, the internal, psychological, and often public pressures remain astonishingly persistent, challenging your understanding of what it truly means to wear a crown in the 21st century. Imagine yourself now, a prominent member of a modern royal family, not enjoying the complete anonymity of a private citizen in, say, San Jose, California, but instead feeling the constant subtle hum of public expectation, every outfit scrutinized, every vacation choice debated, every personal decision becoming a global headline. Picture yourself as a globally recognized political figure, like a First Lady or a Supreme Court Justice, whose every public appearance is analyzed, whose family life is often dissected, and whose personal struggles often become national talking points. Or consider a beloved Hollywood icon, whose life is lived under a microscope, with constant paparazzi, tabloid speculation, and endless pressure to maintain a perfect image. Far more immediate and less personally liberating than simply living a quiet, private life in a modern suburban home in Denver. Colorado, the dazzling lights of cameras flash. The roar of cheering crowds can be deafening. But beneath the polished surface lies a deeply familiar landscape of expectation, judgment, and a profound, often unspoken, burden. This is the pervasive, often poignant, reality of modern royalty, enduring challenges and hidden pressures, where the weight of the crown, though manifest in new forms, remains strikingly heavy, transforming personal identity into a global commodity, and revealing that the ancient miseries of queenship, while evolved, continue to resonate deeply in the lives of those who embody enduring tradition in an increasingly transparent and demanding world. Our journey through the historical miseries of queenship has brought us face to face with a world that often feels alien and brutal. Yet, as we step back into the 21st century, it becomes clear that many of the fundamental challenges faced by queens of old, while stripped of their literal poisonings and medieval diseases, have simply shape-shifted into new, often equally relentless, enduring challenges and hidden pressures for modern royalty. The golden cage, it turns out, still exists, just with more comfortable furnishings and better Wi-Fi. It truly sucked for queens of the past, but it's still no picnic for many modern royals, even if the threats are less overtly lethal. A common historical truth is that modern constitutional monarchies, while largely stripped of direct political power, still place immense pressure on their royal families to maintain a flawless public image, adhere to strict protocols, and provide a sense of continuity and tradition to the nation. Historians still widely debate the long-term sustainability of hereditary monarchy in increasingly democratic and individualistic societies, and whether the perceived benefits of tradition and national identity outweigh the significant personal sacrifices demanded of individual royals. The golden cage. A strong callback to Chapter 1 remains profoundly relevant. Modern royals, particularly queens and princesses, live lives of immense privilege but astonishingly little personal freedom. Their schedules are meticulously planned by palace staff. Their public appearances are carefully choreographed. Every holiday, every family gathering, every choice of school for their children is a matter of public interest and often intense debate. There's no anonymity, no casual trip to the grocery store in, say, Seattle, Washington, without a security detail and the constant threat of paparazzi. The idea of truly being yourself is an almost impossible luxury when your very existence is a public performance. The bloodline burden, a central theme from Chapter 2, has evolved, but not disappeared. While the direct pressure to produce a male heir to avoid dynastic collapse might be less immediate in many stable monarchies, the pressure to produce any heir and to raise them within the strictures of royal life is intense. There is immense public expectation surrounding royal pregnancies and births. The world watches, waits, and comments on every detail, from the queen's pregnancy style to the baby's name. And raising children in the fishbowl of public life, trying to give them a normal upbringing while simultaneously preparing them for a life of duty, is a unique and often overwhelming challenge. Imagine feeling the weight of an entire nation's expectations on your ability to produce and raise children, even without the immediate threat of annulment in modern-day London. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about modern royalty. Enduring challenges and hidden pressures is the curious phenomenon of the silent online jury, where, despite being insulated by palace walls and traditional media, modern royals now face an omnipresent, often anonymous, online scrutiny, with every public photo or anecdote instantly dissected by millions on social media. Not as direct political threats, but as a deeply personal, clandestine form of continuous public judgment and a silent, unspoken erosion of privacy that far surpasses the courtly whispers of old. Transforming casual moments into poignant, almost ritualistic trials of public opinion. Imagine yourself, a modern royal, seeing a seemingly innocent picture of your child trending online, accompanied by thousands of anonymous, often cruel, comments. A deeply personal and often overlooked detail of the new, insidious forms of scrutiny that permeate their lives. It truly sucked for historical queens to be gossiped about. But at least their tormentors weren't globally connected on the internet and couldn't reach them inside their palaces. The unseen scrutiny, the focus of Chapter 6, is perhaps more pervasive than ever before, with 24/7 news cycles, social media, and paparazzi armed with telephoto lenses. Every single aspect of a royal's life is subject to immediate global judgment. What they wear, where they go, who they meet, what charities they support, all are dissected, analyzed, and often criticized by millions. One wrong outfit choice, one perceived slight, or one unscripted moment can lead to a global media storm. The pressure to maintain a flawless public image is immense and ceaseless. Imagine living every moment of your life under the watchful eye of billions, with every single action, from how you hold a cup of tea to how you greet a dignitary, becoming a subject of intense public debate in, say, New York City. New York. Historians still widely debate the extent to which modern royal families, particularly those in constitutional monarchies, serve as a unifying symbol for their nations, versus being a source of public entertainment and tabloid fodder. And whether the media's intense focus on their personal lives overshadows their traditional ceremonial or charitable roles. Even the echo of sickness and superstition from Chapter 7 can be found. While modern medicine offers far better care, royal illnesses still become matters of intense public concern and speculation. The health of a monarch or a key royal figure is a closely guarded secret, precisely because of the historical anxieties about succession and stability. And while overt superstition has faded, a subtle form of public wishful thinking or concern for royal well-being often takes its place, particularly during a health crisis. The strictures of fashion's folly, explored in Chapter 8, continue to define modern royal women. While corsets are less common, modern royal attire is still highly curated and carries immense symbolic weight. Every outfit is chosen to convey a message of dignity, tradition, or approachable modernity. Royal women are fashion icons, their choices instantly copied by millions, but they must also adhere to strict dress codes that limit their personal style and often prioritize formality over comfort. Imagine having every single outfit you wear instantly broadcast globally, analyzed, and critiqued by fashion experts and the general public alike, forcing you to make every clothing choice a strategic one. And finally, the concept of feast or famine from Chapter 9 has transformed from literal digestive discomfort to a more nuanced psychological pressure. While modern royals have access to perfectly safe and balanced diets, the constant public events, banquets, and official engagements mean a demanding social calendar that often revolves around food and drink. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle, balancing public duties with personal well-being, and navigating constant travel and time zone changes can be a hidden source of stress and physical strain. Modern royalty. Enduring challenges and hidden pressures is not just an ending to our historical journey. It's a poignant reflection on the persistent nature of power, expectation, and human experience. It reveals that while the physical dangers and overt brutalities of queenship have largely receded, the psychological and public burdens remain startlingly familiar. The crown, whether ancient or modern, continues to weigh heavily, demanding profound personal sacrifices in exchange for immense privilege, transforming personal lives into public spectacles, and reminding us that even in our modern, seemingly free world, some golden cages are simply too magnificent to dismantle entirely. As we bring this journey to a gentle close, allow yourself to slowly drift away from the grand palaces and the ancient anxieties. Feel the soft hum of the fan, the dim glow of your room, as the images of queens and their struggles gently recede into the quiet corners of your mind. Remember their strength, their endurance, and the silent battles they fought, not just for their kingdoms, but for their very selves. Now, as the last echoes of their gilded lives fade, let your own world fill with peace. The burdens of their crowns are no longer yours to carry, and the weight of history gives way to the lightness of your own rest. Let your thoughts soften, your breath deepen, and allow yourself to sink into the quiet comfort of the night, knowing that you are safe, secure, and truly free.